Hello, good day to you, Miss Dora. Today I will be presenting my journal assignment 1 about to identify the hazards of occupational noise exposure. So uh, the topic that I choose is the first one is occupational noise exposure and its impact on workers' health and activities. Secondly is occupational noise and effect on blood pressure. And the third one is occupational noise exposure and hearing loss of workers in two plants in eastern Saudi Arabia. For the introduction, the first one is occupational noise exposure and its impact on workers' health and activities. So the occupational health and safety are interdependent and complementary to each other, where it plays a vital role and for the life of the workers. This hearing loss due to noise pollution is one of the most common occupational disease. So the attention is being paid to its harmful effects. So the noise hearing loss has been listed as the third epidemic disease worldwide. It can cause physical and psychological dysfunction, creates disease such as tetanus, and also other negative effects. Secondly is about occupational noise and effects on blood pressure. So according to National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, NIOS, uh, there are 30 million workers are exposed to the hazardous noise on the job. This includes hearing loss. It's been the second most self-reported occupational illness or injury among the American workers. So many professionals are at risk for higher levels of noise exposure. For example, according to NIOS, construction employees and firefighters were all exposed to unsafe noise at different times during their work shift. So it has been estimated that hearing-related workers' compensation costs from 1984 to 1993 amounted to estimated 3.4 billion of the expenses. Such potential workers' compensation costs are likely to provide an additional incentive for improving hearing conversation practice by an industry or government uh, in 1994. And then the third one is about occupational noise exposure and hearing loss of workers in two plants, which is located in eastern Saudi Arabia. So the occupational exposure to excessive noise is commonly encountered in a great variety of industrial process. This resulting injury of occupational hearing loss is a well-organized and a global problem now, and it affects many subjects, both civilians and the military. And hearing loss resulting from exposure to high noise and level, it depends not only on exposure time, but also on the frequency of the exposure, the intensity, and the type of noise. So in Saudi Arabia, there were many industries that have been established since 1970s. Many within the workforce of these industries were exposed to occupational hazard and consequently are at high risk of work-related diseases. And we move on to the problems of the study, which is the comparison. So this is my comparison about the occupational noise exposure and its impact on workers' health and activities. So this cross-sectional research works based on a number of difficulties faced by the workers and the effects on their health along with their process. So this study shows and provides some of the tip-off to solve the causes in an appropriate way. And this study also shown that according to the data that were collected through environmental noise survey, uh, by using a digital sound level meter and minimum and maximum sound levels were recorded to distinguish in between average sound levels. This survey was also conducted to identify the health problems of the workers. We move on the second one, which is noise and effects on blood pressure. So the research on noise in the workplace and the effect of blood pressure has not been consistent. A review of the literature identified several studies that suggested a positive relationship between the occupational noise and elevated blood pressure. So few studies were equivocal and few were found there were no relation between these variables. So it is very quite difficult to compare to the studies. However, because of the different populations sizes, settings, the methodology, and the various confounding factors measures in each study. And then the third one is the occupational noise exposure and hearing loss of the workers in two plants in eastern Saudi Arabia. So the work-related diseases are amenable to prevention through the recognition, evaluation, and the control of the hazards in the ideal world. So effective practice of occupational health and hygiene has yet not be fully accepted and developed in Saudi Arabia. So and then to date, few studies have been conducted in the location, which is to investigate the occupational hazards such as noise and the effects and among the working population. So against this background, the investigators design and progress in epidemiological studies of the noise exposure and hearing loss among the workers in two plants in eastern province of Saudi Arabia. And this is my opinion about this research. First, we move to the occupational noise exposure and its effects on workers' health and activities. So in my opinion, this research is about the data collection of workers to identify the causes of noise effects and to determine the control measures to solve the causes of noise hazards at the workplace. Secondly, in my opinion, about the effects on the blood pressure. So this study has shown to identify the effect of the occupational noise and the relationship about the effects to our blood pressure, and a few studies were equivocal and were found there were no relationship between these variables. So it's quite hard to identify the relationship between noise and the effects on our blood pressure. And next we move on to the occupational noise exposure and hearing loss of the two plants of the two workers in eastern Saudi Arabia. In my opinion, this research is about the exposure to noise, and studies have been shown and conducted in Saudi Arabia to investigate the occupational hazard, uh, such as noise, and its health effect on the working condition and the population of the plant. So this is the aim of the study. For the first one is to evaluate the noise level, uh, and then to investigate the perception of plant workers' attitude. What does it mean about attitude is about the work culture that the workers practice at the workplace, because it's to avoid any unwanted accident at the workplace. And then next is the status of the occupational noise population, to help to describe about the the population there and small medium enterprises in Karachi city. It is very important to understand the noise exposure, because to study the relationship between noise and its adverse effect on human body. And this study also to identify the health impact and safety measures of the workplace, the safety um, to be implemented to the workers workplace. Next we move on to the occupational noise and its effect on the blood pressure. So the aim of this NIOS research, supply written reports with evaluation result, uh, which help employees to evaluate and control noise exposures, so if necessary, and develop employee education programs and being the hearing loss prevention, NIOS 199. And when evaluating noise hazards, NIOS may conduct survey employees, have information, uh, monitor the noise exposure, conduct workers audiometric evaluation, assess employee use of personal protective equipment, which is the PPE, and then with protected hearing device, and to review the current hearing loss prevention policies, and to follow the standard. And then we move on to the noise exposure and hearing loss of the two workers in two plants at Saudi Arabia. So the specific objective of the study were to estimate levels of current and past occupational noise exposure, was to determine the extent and pattern of hearing loss among the study population, to assess the risk factors and influence hearing loss at each of conventional frequencies were tested, and finally to evaluate the knowledge and practices of the workers, to see if they were aware of the noise hazard. This is the result of the study. The first one is about occupational exposure and its impact of the workers' health and activities. So this research is to understand the impact of noise exposure among the workers' health in Karachi City. So there were many variables such as pulse rate, noise level, and blood pressure were analyzed. And then second is about the occupational noise and effect on the blood pressure. This research to identify and prevent possible health-related effects at the workplace. So what they did is they did the monitoring, odometry, and blood pressure screening were essential to be conducted among the workers. And then thirdly, we move on to the noise exposure and hearing loss of workers in two plants in eastern Saudi Arabia. So in this study, what I found is the noise emission level was identified one of the most important factors in predicting hearing uh, threshold at all the frequencies were tested with age ranking, and the workforce within both factories in this study were at high risk of developing noise induced hearing loss due to excessive occupational noise exposure. And this is the comparison and my opinion about the result of the study. So the first one is the occupational noise exposure and its impact uh, on workers' health and their activities. In my opinion, research work evaluated at the occupational noise exposure and its impact on industrial workers. The appropriate action were taken to evaluate the noise level and the impact on each of the workers' health, and also to investigate the perception of plant workers' attitude about health and safety to create awareness among the workers. And this is my second comparison about the effects of occupational noise on the blood pressure. So in my opinion, these studies have attempted to explain the psychological mechanism of how noise may play a role in increased hypertension on other common work or related factors. At the same time, it's important to control the possible confounding effects, and it shows the public that health impact of noisy working condition, with exception of hearing loss, can underestimated when combine all the factors which is not considered. And this is my third comparison of the occupational noise exposure of hearing loss in of workers in two plants which is located at the eastern Saudi Arabia. And according to my opinion, this research shows that the effect of noise exposure is to estimate the levels of current uh, and to determine of hearing loss and the pattern among the student, which is the population in the two plants in eastern Saudi Arabia. And then this is the adequacy of the information that I've gained for the extract for the literature report. This is the conclusion. First one is about the occupational noise exposure and its impact on the workers' health and activities. The purpose and the main objective on this research is to evaluate the noise level and impact on the workers' health, and to investigate the perception of the workers' attitude and awareness about the safety and health. This cross-sectional research work based on a number of difficulties that been faced by the workers, their health effect, along with their causes. The methodology that has been used to evaluate the occupational noise exposure is uh, taking the sample of 100 workers from 5 different industries, and the noise survey was conducted in accordance with the procedure standard of the manual. For the occurrence and precise result, the blood pressure and pulse rate were measured for each workers by electronic digital wrist blood pressure instrument. Sample of each workers were collected twice a day, first in the 9:30 a.m. up until to 10 a.m. and second they are conduct after 4 to 5 hours during the work time, and the measurement includes systolic and diastolic blood. As a result of this study is to understand the impact of noise exposure on workers' health in Karachi city. There were many variables that were available and were analyzed. In conclusion, this study explained that noise is a concerning hazard and importance to apply health and safety awareness. With the reference that I've studied from the plants and the industries plays an important role about the noise effect on the workers. In all studied plants, noise population is very intensive, and all controlling measures and prevention of noise hazard must be implemented to all the factories, which is this is a priority that should be taken. So the second one is about the noise and effect on blood pressure. The purpose of this study is to identify the suggested prevention about the possibility with related with the health effect, uh, the workplace monitoring, odometry, and blood pressure screening is essential to be conducted. So the methodology that they use is the NIOS who are asked to perform the health hazard evaluation at the workplace, which of may are related to noise exposure. So when they're evaluating the noise hazard, NIOS may take survey of employees, have information to monitor the noise exposure, to conduct the workers' odometric evaluation, assess the employee the use of personal protective equipment, which is the PPE, and then with connected with hearing devices, and the review of the current hearing loss prevention policies and standard, uh, and then as a result, for a safety program to work, management support are essential, along with basic noise reduction practices, work setting with evaluated noise exposure, uh, occupational and environmental health should be focused on creating a program designing to prevent exposure to high level of occupational noise. So in conclusion, the evidence for a relation between noise and elevated blood pressure is still inclusive because of the limitation in research design and analysis, including the exposure characterization and adjustment in the future. This is my final and third abstract. about occupational noise exposure and hearing loss of workers in two plants, which is located in eastern Saudi Arabia. The purpose of this research is to determine the causes of hearing loss associated with occupational noise exposure and risk factor. This study shows greater understanding of the effect of noise and hearing, which is led to minimum standard for noise exposure being adopted, and the legislation passed to limit noise exposure to assess the risk factors that may be